Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's the Jacked Up Review Show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show.
Phone booth. I've watched it a bunch of times. I love it. Cellular, I've seen a few times, but it's been a while. But I read up on it today, so I've bought it. But messages deleted. All I've done is watch the trailer. But I've got I got a vibe from it.
Not a good one.
No, it's fine. No, I haven't seen the movie, but yeah, just from the trailer, I have some things to say about it. It reminded me of a few things. Although I hate that Matthew Lilliard. I just want to punch him in his fucking face.
That's all good.
He's not a good actor. He's not a good actor. He's a terrible actor.
I've seen him be good on a few of the crime shows that he guest starred on. He was just believable
is that what he's doing now?
Well, if he's not voicing Shaggy in Scooby-Doo, that's what I've seen him do. Just be the serial killer of the week. He's kind of just in Screamville still.
Yeah, he's definitely over the top. Anyway, yeah. So that just so you know, yeah. So I'm not that familiar with messages deleted, but the other two I'm pretty up on, and I've looked up Larry Cohen, his filmography, so I've got that here. So I know a few of the movies that he did. Like then we definitely have to talk about It's Alive and The Stuff.
Oh yeah,
those are fucking classics.
Absolutely. We'll definitely do a top 10 Larry Cohen movies.
Well, I don't know that I know 10 of them, but I know a couple of them.
Oh, that's why we have multiple people on. Everyone can kind of pitch in and say, yeah, out of the most of the resume I've seen, that one has to be on there somewhere, you know. And
yeah. But yeah, whenever you're ready, man, I'm ready. I got my drink. Okay. I got my cat. I'm ready.
Woo.
Yeah.
So, what was your introduction to? Was this your first Larry Cohen movie, David?
Well, no, actually, I because of the doing the podcast we did tonight, I looked him up, and I didn't realize he had directed some freaking classics from the '80s, man.
Some Blaxploitation movies with Williamson. Some various other.
Now I have not seen those, but I'm talking about like Q and The Stuff.
Yeah,
and It's Alive. It's Alive was a big. That's from 1974, I guess. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
When I was a younger man, I remember that movie made especially had a big cult following. I don't think it made shit at the box office, but it became quite had quite the cult following. It's actually not a bad movie. I mean, it's ridiculous, but most of his movies that's so he goes for it, man.
There's that, and it comes on Turner Classic Movies Friday night cult section quite a lot, and they would show it along with God Told Me To.
Yes, that's on my to watch list. I watched the trailer, and it looks a lot like. Have you seen Fallen with Denzel Washington?
Exactly.
Doesn't it have that vibe?
It had inspired one of the filmmakers related with movies like that around the time, if not Shocker or The First Power, you know.
Shocker's one of those who's just so over the top.
Yeah, good idea, not good execution. So it's just no pun intended. It's just one of those. It's entertaining.
Who's the actor who played the heavy in Shocker? I can't think of his name.
Filmmaker Peter Berg.
That was the one who played the Shocker.
I think so. Last I checked.
I just remember the trailer, but It's Alive was and wasn't that wasn't that one of Rick Baker's early works doing the baby in It's Alive?
I believe so.
I'm looking at my notes.
But I think what's weird about Cohen is he just had work. He's just one of the few people who was fortunate enough to work on so many productions of different kinds because he just had sold so many scripts for TV and movies.
Yeah, prolific writer, unbelievable. His resume of the writing. I mean, The Invaders. He wrote episodes for every series back then. What the Rat
Salem
Patrol?
Plot,
I think Rat Patrol and
Rat Patrol is definitely a big. He did a lot of those military shows and mystery and horror stuff. Like
he definitely has writing cred.
Yeah, and he was just one of those. I would see people label him as a hack every once in a while. I was like, no, see, hack is what you put on someone who got lucky and doesn't. That would be someone like Max Landis, John Landis' son. People who just rip off other people's ideas and act like they've made works of art.
Yeah, I wouldn't. He's not a hack. He's just prolific.
Yeah,
his body of work is just enormous.
And so I really am offended by the hack label. It's like hack is what you say on someone whose movies weren't good but made a lot of money. And, it's just people who never liked them to begin with. And see, his work was pretty well liked back in the day, even with the strictest of people. People said that was a really thought-provoking, if ridiculous on concept movie, or that was a very cool midnight movie at the drive-in. It's just his ideas. Yes, sometimes the execution of the movies are ridiculous, but the ideas are not bad, and that an idea is better than a movie, regardless of the execution. And he really did try his hand at different genre. You can't say he's not diverse. He didn't get too comfortable. He didn't get typecast even, and I mean, because his ideas are mostly thriller based, that's what's cool about him too, is often the filmmakers add mystery, horror, action elements to them as well, but that's why they're even better. They got multiple layers to them.
Yeah, the stuff he did, I wasn't familiar with some of it, but I went and looked up, like The Ambulance. I need to watch that movie. That's a great concept. I mean, that sounds like a Stephen King story to me.
It's definitely kind of got that kind of tone, and
I haven't watched it. Again, full disclosure, I've not seen it, but I watched the trailer and I read up on it. His stuff, Maniac Cop. Come on, Maniac Cop with Robert Zadar, the Chin.
Yeah, we love doing our episode on Maniac Cop. That was a lot of fun, especially for today's world, mirroring that. It was wild how The Ambulance feels like it could easily make a great double feature with that franchise, or even exist in the same world.
Well, you know what it felt like to me, just from the trailer. It felt like an episode of The Night Stalker with Kolchak, the Night Stalker. It felt like that. Do you remember that show? Am I too old now? Am I dating myself?
I know the show. I didn't really ever see much of it, and
I'm so old. It was great.
The problem is, most people nowadays are going to just know about that shitty reboot show, and it's like, God damn it, don't get.
Oh, the original was great. God, it was great. Loved it.
Yeah, well, and it was very inspirational. It definitely inspired all these Twin Peaks, X-Files type shows where you just had to have some kind of moody.
Yeah, it was like the Twilight Zone, but it had much more of a bite to it. It had much more of an edge to it. I mean, you had a fucking
pun intended.
You had fucking headless motorcycle rider chopping off people's heads. Come on.
Yeah, and I mean, just it wasn't necessarily graphic in nature as it was just kind of freaky. Is like, okay.
Very much proto X-Files. Yeah, I don't think we would have had the X-Files if we didn't if we hadn't had Kolchak, and if we hadn't had Twilight Zone, we wouldn't have had Kolchak. But yeah, definitely.
You wouldn't even have had some of these other Canadian shows like Forever Night or First Wave. Yeah,
Forever Night. God, Forever Night. Now that was kind of bad.
All good.
I just remember watching bits of it.
It's not for everyone.
It wasn't for me. But we got to talk about the stuff. He wrote the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of people label that as a so good it's bad movie, but I think it's a legit good movie.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It's obviously got budgetary restrictions. It's got fucking Garrett Morris in it though. Come on.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it makes a great double feature with They Live.
Yeah, it does. It would fit nicely with that, isn't it? Well, it's about consumerism and
it could have only
American,
been made
our
back
addiction
in the
to
80s.
Yeah, and our addiction to junk food.
If you made something like that nowadays, people would just be too distracted by what today's stuff is. That someone would try and put a connotation, say it's propaganda for today's world, and it's just, that's the problem. So many movies are referencing stuff from, decades ago, which had themes that were relevant even today, but everybody has to politicize a movie before it comes out, and it's like, it's just so hard to...
Well, you have to look at a movie, I think, through the lens of when it was made. Like, if you were to watch the stuff, if you were to show the stuff to, like, people today, maybe younger people, they would immediately be like, oh, they're raping the land. And but it's not, I mean, yes, but that's not what it was about back then.
Right.
That wasn't as big of an issue back then. Not that it shouldn't be an issue, and not that it shouldn't have been an issue. It just wasn't. So you have to look at movies through the lens of the time they were made, I think. Or otherwise you won't enjoy anything.
Well, you have to do that, and you also have to set, like, there's a bunch of other 80s movies that have moments where it's like, man, okay, technically that character's a Nazi. And it's like, well, yeah, that was the standard back then. He was an authoritative person who technically is doing his job. He just doesn't know that he's technically being a brute and everything. And so it's like, you gotta just look at the time it's made in, because that's the only way you'll be able to make any sense of what was going on.
Yeah, and you can learn from it. You can learn from, even if you look at stuff by, you look at Triumph of the Will by Leni Riefenstahl. I mean, yeah, she worked for the fucking Nazis, but I mean, she was a good filmmaker. Not that the films she made weren't heinous, but you can still learn from them.
Yeah.
I don't think they should be, glorified as great art, but you can still learn from. You can even learn from horrible stuff.
Well,
I just have a soft spot for this stuff. I think it came out. So what was it? 85. So yeah, where was I in 85? Isn't that funny? That's how I analyze films. I try to figure out where I was in my life.
I do a bit of that too.
When it came out.
Yeah.
Usually with me,
enough to watch it back then, is like, understand it.
with me, it comes down to how much drugs was I doing at that particular time in my life. And the stuff, I have to admit, it was a lot of drugs in 85.
It's probably made it more surreal back then, but I mean,
maybe that's why I like it. Maybe that's why I like it more.
Well, in all fairness, I mean, you couldn't make it today. If you did something like that today, people would be like, oh, it's propaganda for vegans or organicness or junk food. It's like, people would try and add all these connotations to it just based on just seeing the trailer. It's like, have you seen the movie? No. Okay, well, shut up. You got to actually watch the movie. Don't wait. If there's any hacks in the industry, it's the people who do the actual ads, the trailers for the movie. They half the time just go to just random moments and just oversaturate it. They don't actually tell you.
We could do a whole episode on how trailers have changed through the years. I was actually having this discussion with my daughter the other day. We were watching The Omen, and I put on that. So let's watch the trailer. We watched the trailer. Trailers were different. Have changed so much through the years. I mean, there was back in the 70s and even earlier, trailers gave away almost nothing. They were like just a collection of images with that one dude whose name I don't know doing the voiceover. Now trailers basically show you.
Fontaine. Yeah.
Is that who? I have to look it up. Yeah, that one guy who did every single trailer back then. He had that
Absolutely.
great voice. And now trailers trailers now show you shit that is not even in the movie.
Yeah, and so it's a ripoff.
They make the trailer before the movie's been edited. Had final edit.
Yeah,
so you see scenes in a trailer that aren't even in the finished movie.
I'd rather fall victim to a scam. It's like, for real? That doesn't, no. Oh, or they do scenes exclusively for the trailer where someone like Ryan Reynolds is talking to the audience. It's like, that's not in the movie. Don't include it.
Right, we're going to film this specifically for the trailer. I mean, I don't mean to sound like an old curmudgeon where everything was better back then, but it was certainly different.
Honestly, like, unless it's a movie by, I know certain studios have a different formula. I pretty much anytime I see a trailer for Lionsgate or Universal, I tend to get sold. All the other studios do a pretty bad job of not only just giving everything away, but just catering, just having very overdone music, it's just, you see the money on the screen as opposed to someone actually went out and is just making a movie. Is like, Warner Brothers will always misadvertise, and what's the other one?
I don't know.
Disney is really bad at just showing the money on the screen, and it's like, oh, for God's sakes, this will entertain the 10-year-olds, but
I guess I I don't know. That would be a great. Yeah, that would be a great. You could do a great like doctoral thesis on just how movie trailers have changed throughout the years.
I kind of do it in every review I do for the movie.
Because it's just a little snippet of like where our heads were in any particular decade.
Well, it's even worse
we were
now.
looking for.
Well, it's even worse now because now with independent stuff and video on demand, I pretty much always have to have a disclaimer in my review that'll make sense to anyone who goes to Redbox or Amazon and just say, this isn't a Troma or Maverick home entertainment movie. And people who are familiar with those instantly get it. They're like,
they know
okay.
We know what to expect.
So there's no bad sound quality or, it doesn't look like it was shot cheaply with a low-res iPhone. Okay, cool. I'll give it a chance.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a lot of hood or type violence or just random, high school level special effects. Okay, good.
He did that remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers in 1993, which I did not care for, but they tried.
Oh yeah, that's right. Cohen did write that, didn't he?
He wrote that. I don't think it quite worked.
It's all good. I thought it was watchable, but it was a 2 a.m. kind of movie for me. It wasn't as dense as the 78 version.
Well, I'm such a fan of the Donald Sutherland one. I'm almost like fiercely protective of it because that movie meant everything to me as a kid. I mean, it came out 78. So what was I, 13? I mean, that movie was just and like The Omen were just in my wheelhouse of horror.
Yeah, I've seen some people in recent years trash the 78 one. I'm like, no, there's so much. Yeah, there's a level of dread that's very
and hopelessness.
Hopelessness.
It's just hopelessness, and that works, as a dramatic theme, doesn't it? It makes
Absolutely.
you feel. It makes you feel. It makes you feel bad, but at least it makes you feel.
It makes you exactly, and see, I didn't see any emotion in the very original 50s black and white one.
I watched it just the other day. It's a great movie, but yeah, well, I think they were dealing with different themes then. That was the Red Scare,
Right.
They look just like us, but they're not us. Almost like, it wasn't really immigration. I think it was mainly, communism.
I think the problem is I'm just very picky about 50s B sci-fi. Like, I'm more of a Forbidden Planet. Forbidden
Planet. That's a good one. That's a great one. Fucking Leslie Nielsen at his most stoic, ramrod straight, and then
yeah, with 50s stuff, I cater more to just kind of mystery and adventure and light fantasy stuff from around that time. It's very hard to sci-fi. That's where it gets oversaturated, and we see a lot of what we see today now, where the effects basically have to sell the movie, or the stars have to sell the movie. And it's like, don't get me wrong, we like good actors, we like good effects, but we still need some substance here, people. And I think that's why Cohen's, all these scripts of his for these cell phone movies pretty much have been lying around for years, much like Unforgiven, just for any contrast. They've been around for years and they just finally got made. And so, respectively, it all started off in 2002. Yeah. It was under budget, but it was produced by Joel Schumacher, who, needed to come back after doing a lot of crowd-pleasing fantasy, crime, and horror films. After doing 2 Batman movies that had torn his fan base apart, he did a lot of these other mystery movies, and this one took off pretty well. I had a lot of people who I thought would have liked it, but despite liking his earlier work, like Flatliners or Falling Down, they didn't really care for this one, and I always come back to it. I think it's the rare mixture of, it's both a good Cohen movie and a good Schumacher movie, where you have this Hannibal Lecter type guy, terrorizing a guy over the phone, and you only see him in the last 10 minutes. You got this police captain who actually believes the hostage, who
he's actually a good person.
Well, he's not a good person, but he's a good-hearted person. So, like, he's done adultery.
I'm talking the cop.
Oh, yeah.
He actually wants to he actually cares about saving the lives of these people and finding out the truth. He's not a caricature of a bad cop. He's a good person.
He's like the only guy who's not going to shoot him on sight.
Exactly, right. He's like the one sort of oasis of compassion.
And it was filmed in like Canada, but I think they did a good job getting some New York looking scenery. The rest of this cast is really cool, and this made me a Colin Farrell fan for life. And this was around the time where he was becoming a punching bag, much like Ben Affleck. Everybody was just seeing his tabloid stuff, his sex life, and
well, I was gonna say, because this movie. So when the movie starts, we fucking hate his character. Hate his character, and you're supposed to, obviously.
yeah,
And that's the way kind of Colin Farrell was in the public eye then too. He was, he's a hothead.
casting, yeah.
So it's it worked perfectly. And as the movie goes on, at first we enjoy watching him be made to suffer, but then it gets to a point where, okay, it's gone a little too far now. And you actually start to feel compassion for him, or you start to feel his, his pain. And yeah. And it's funny how your attitude towards his character throughout the film changes.
Absolutely. And I mean,
at first he's just a total irredeemable scumbag.
Yeah, he treats it. His assistant asks him some harmless questions, and he just pushes him aside, saying, "Hey,
yeah, he's just an absolute.
Why can't you just do your work, your job?" He's like, "You haven't told me what to do." He's like, "No, get the fuck away, please."
Almost to the point of parody. He's almost parodying what we think of like a Hollywood agent, or was he an agent? Was he an agent? Was that what his?
He's definitely an agent. He's basically some kind of producer where he's a money man. He gets stuff done. He does the deal. He breaks, even if he's not the money guy, he still breaks the deal.
He brings the money to the filmmakers. Yeah, he's like
has the mouth.
He's the deal maker.
He's so used to crushing all the other bullies who have money, whatever industry. He's the guy who goes up to some Wall Street guys and says, "Hey, listen, you still owe me this amount, and you're going to give me my product. Otherwise, I'll sue you in court, and you'll lose because I'm more loaded. I have better diction than you." And that's just it. His words kill. He's that toxic a guy. He's the boss who got his job by luck, but then fired everybody and then hired him again, but made them feel like they owed him something. He's that kind of shithead.
Yeah, he's definitely a backstabber. You can see he's just a total scumbag.
And that's the brilliance of this movie. And it makes good use of split screen, which was becoming a thing around the 2000s. And all the other supporting actors, they've been in a lot of indie or Canadian or B movies, but they do a really good job too. I was already a fan of Radha Mitchell, having seen some of her later.
Yes, I love her. Yes, great actress. Very interesting look to her. I loved her in the Crazies remake.
Yeah,
that was her, right? That's her. Yeah. The Crazies remake, which I think is great. We were talking about that earlier. How people would, oh my god, I can't believe they remade that. No, it's a good movie. But love her. Great actress.
Had its own soul, so to speak. And this is a movie too where it's comfortable being its own thing. And I love how much like with Falling Down, or even Schumacher's earlier crime thriller. Did you ever see Flawless with De Niro and Philip Seymour Hoffman?
God, I don't think I have. I remember seeing it in the Cohen filmography. I was doing research today, but I don't think I've ever seen that now.
That's an earlier Schumacher movie, but it's kind of a similar movie where it's got a lot of other crime elements, and yet every character has their moments. Even the minor characters that have as big backstory implied as the main characters.
Yeah, like the pimp, the guy who plays the pimp in this. He's got very little to do in the film, but he makes an impression. They give him plus the actor, I have it in front of me, but I can't think of his name. Did a great job in that. Terrifying.
John.
Could you imagine that guy? Could you imagine that guy outside of a phone booth that he wants to get into, and you're stuck in there? I mean, he was terrifying.
Exactly. He didn't need a weapon or a shank. He just flat out was like, "I will destroy you."
And he starts out like nice. Come on, buddy, get out. And it just becomes worse and worse for poor.
That's Colin the other thing too. The city of New York is just as much. New York City is just as big a star here as the rest of this movie too. I mean, you're seeing, again, why is the pimp there? It's because of all the prostitutes that are trying to get his business, and then they're trying to start. And
they were great. Those two actors who played those prostitutes were great. They did their characters great. He's gonna kick your ass. I remember her doing that little sing song to him.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Great role for, I don't know who that actress is, but she really stood out. He's gonna kick your ass. It just made me laugh.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. That sets us up for all the other drama and everything. It gets us kind of in the mood, and it elevates the shocks. Yeah, because that's what every thriller needs. You need well done shock value, not just really, and that's what every other movie seems to get wrong. They just go for the shocks, but there's no input, so it's just rendered mute.
I thought it was very interesting, the dynamic when the pimp, I can't think of his character's name, but anyway, he's getting ready to drag him out of the phone booth and obviously just beat him to a pulp, and he gets shot. So our Colin Farrell character is relieved that he's not going to get his ass kicked, but he realizes he's just watched a person die.
Yeah, and
right?
Then he hides in the phone booth to call, 911, and so therefore.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. So I was just saved by the person who's tormenting me by watching him kill, maybe not an innocent person, but someone who, was shot in front of me for no good reason.
Exactly.
Other than this tormentor's amusement. Maybe I'm going too deep there, but I thought that was an interesting dynamic.
Well, it's what it was needed. I mean, and that's just Cohen's signature. Schumacher's signature is just, borrowing David Fincher's, some of his cinematographers, and giving all this dark, moody music video style.
It does feel like a Fincher film in that way, doesn't it?
Well, that's because they're best friends, believe it or not.
Oh, are they? I did not. I'm a big fan of David Fincher. Ever since Seven, and I'm a big fan.
And I think that's just it too. It does kind of have a Seven kind of feel, where even though it doesn't have a lot of the noir stuff, it still has a lot of just the moody backdrop.
You've got the criminal mastermind pulling the strings.
Well, and it just goes to show they clearly storyboarded this. It doesn't feel like we're just going to get whatever we got. I'm just a mercenary for hire at this point in my career. Everybody was really taking this seriously. They had done a lot of similar movies in the past before, so it was just, to them, it might have been more of the same, but it was the same amount of effort, and they knew it was going to pay off because they, it's one location, so they have a lot of time to pick a lot of different angles and get a lot of the mood and lighting right, And
one thing I wanted to mention, I was reading that Cohen actually pitched this to Alfred Hitchcock way back when.
I have no doubt he's been around for years, and so
and that they couldn't figure out at the time. I have it right here in front of me. They couldn't figure out at the time how to justify the fact that he's going to stay in the phone booth the whole time, because he hadn't come up with the idea of the sniper then.
Oh, okay.
And then Hitchcock died, obviously, and then he eventually worked up the idea of the sniper. But yeah, but could you imagine if Hitchcock had directed it? I mean, it feels like a Hitchcock film.
Oh, that's just it.
Strangers on a train, or
well,
claustrophobic.
Well, and that's why I think this really paid off, because Schumacher, he had really gone for really Hitchcock kind of levels with, his John Grissom adaptations, The Client and A Time to Kill.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And
great
same
movies.
kind of scenarios, even some of the same actors here, supporting actors. It's just that kind of feel where it's like all the perpetrators of violence have as much a backstory as all the guys trying to diffuse the situation and win the court cases. Yeah, and so even though there's no lawyers here, is like, and they're kind of more in the form. I mean, even the supporting cops have some interesting moments where they're trying to, they're very unsure of the situation, and you just see it read on their faces. They're like, is this going to escalate into another violent confrontation or what? And a common criticism I see of this movie is people say, oh, I wouldn't have liked this had it gone on for another hour. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to agree to disagree. I could have handled another hour with this. If you can handle all the other hostage thriller type movies go on for 2 hours, I think you can handle this one.
Oh, I don't.
It's around 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's fairly short movie.
I could have handled a full 2 hours, because I love just how this unlikable character becomes someone who you feel worried about. I love how there's...
Well, he's made to suffer, and then he's made to confess his sins publicly.
Yeah.
And apparently that scene was shot in one take. He just went for it.
they didn't need any other takes. Yeah,
he's definitely pilloried in the public square, and then we almost feel bad. It's like, okay, he suffered enough. You know, I don't know. I guess I don't know what this says about us, like that we need to watch a reprehensible character suffer before we can, you know, identify with their humanity. I guess that's not a great reflection on us as a society.
I just mean I could have had like maybe 30 more minutes of the negotiators kind of just saying, hey, you know, it's just, can I get any other backstory on this guy, and just maybe get a confession from his wife at the end saying, you know, our marriage isn't repaired, but you know, I will always. I learned a lot from this very day. How much, you know, it could have been interesting if redundant to some, but I also, good casting here on Kiefer Sutherland as the caller. That was very well done. This is one of the first movies I saw him in, and
the fact that he wasn't in any of the promotional stuff at all. I knew it.
Yeah, save for the DVD cover. People have to remember, he was not on the poster. We saw on the posters was Colin Farrell and Forrest Whitaker shouting.
I didn't realize he was on they put Kiefer Sutherland on the DVD cover?
Yeah.
I did not realize that.
But I don't mind that. You know, that just kind of, that actually.
By the time it's out on video, I guess they figure everybody who cares about this movie would know already that it's Kiefer Sutherland.
And even though it's mostly a voice role and he was only there for like 1.5 days or something like that, it's still, it was effective. He definitely finds his strengths, having done villain roles before. But I mean, he has
a very recognizable voice.
There's that, and he, you know, I really do think that the whole sniper role itself was, well, you know, you don't need to know about the guy other than that he's a madman. He says some darkly humorous stuff like, you know, just people eat their own, you know, and
he makes a comment about getting shot 41 times just pulling out your wallet, which is actually a reference to an actual incident.
That's the other thing too. Yeah,
I have it here, but I can't think of his name.
He's making references to so many other actual real life incidences, and so that's why I feel this is a perfect counterpart to Falling Down. You know, because Defense makes a lot of real life references there too. You know, and it's kind of a taxi driver type of imagery.
Falling Down is such a great film. I could go on. I could talk about that one for hours.
I think we all could. It's just, but it's that kind of level of well developed. Just like you want to dissect the dialogue, because I mean he does other stuff too. Like remember the one, and he implies. I mean, they show briefly two other people about 3 other people who've been shot too. They're like,
right,
shot on,
and they were all
Street.
Right, and they were all, you know, from just the brief sketch we get, they're all scummy. It was like, wasn't it like a personal injury lawyer, and it was
another guy was like a pedophile or something. Yeah, and
right,
it's like,
they were
at least I put him away because the
right.
justice system doesn't do anything. So this is again another good Cohen development. This definitely ranks up with some of his other people. Like, if I had to do another contrast, he does this excellent, very underrated, in my opinion. It's ridiculous, but it works on a Cohen level. It's a Sidney Lumet film called Guilty as Sin.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but I love.
But Lumet. It's a total Cape Fear kind of just legal thriller.
I haven't seen it.
And it's very twisted, just how, much like this, you want to talk defense lawyers again. It's a defense lawyer who realizes she actually is representing a madman, and she has to find a way to creatively lose the case. Because they don't have enough evidence to convict him, and yet he is, you know, scum of the earth. So this is the same kind of parallel. You got this guy who's doing all this Hannibal Lecter type taunting, but is a good character in his own right. And I'm so glad that they never made any direct sequels to this, you know, because it's just like, it would have just been fucking ridiculous had it been a, you know, I Know What You Did Last Summer type shitfest.
Yeah, right, exactly. A movie like this doesn't need a sequel. It's short, it's compact.
Yeah, there's plenty of good dialogue that you can dissect again.
And like, what would the sequel be like? Like a different sniper, traps him in a different phone booth
too. No, thank you. And by this time, this is I consider this kind of a historical fiction in some way, loose way, because I mean, you still have phone booths, but they're only at like nearby gas stations here and there. You know, they're not. I don't even know how many of them are still up in New York.
Well, even at the opening of this movie, they accept the fact that phone booths are archaic. They even say, you know, there are only so many phone booths left in New York City. I can't remember the opening, but they even kind of give you that. Like, okay,
That's
we know
just
that
it.
phone booths aren't ubiquitous anymore, but still, there's just one phone booth, so just deal with it. You know,
Because I mean,
like,
no, that's totally cool because how it's all staged. You first see off, Colin Farrell's just talking angrily on his cell phone. They're showing how spoiled he is. Everyone else, they're waiting.
And the reason he even uses the phone booth is because he's calling the other girl, the Katie Holmes character, on the slide.
He doesn't want to be found.
Doesn't want it on his phone bill. Yeah, so you're right. Even more reason to hate him.
So, and it's very inspirational. You're able to buy into why did just anybody go into the phone booth. You don't have any time to say, oh, this could have all been avoided had he not gotten in the booth. It's like, well, that's just it. This guy was looking for this kind of person. He keeps a tab on all these type of assholes who he stalks and sees every day going through the streets of New York from Wall Street.
Yeah, he watches. He tells him, I've been watching you. See how he treats people. And
he was going to become a victim anyway because he's the kind of guy who pushes people aside in the line just because he's of the elite. He's he is of the higher class in his mind. He deserves it more than the other guy who actually can't afford a phone bill and needs to put a quarter in to call his mother or his girlfriend. So that's the other thing cool too is just you are seeing people walk around. The city is just as alive as the actual people in this incident. And so you never feel like this is closed off or shot on the very tight, despite it being lower budgeted. And I can't say enough things about it. So it's a full 4 out of 5 for me. Definitely one of the best mystery movies.
Yeah, I love this movie. I love it.
It's got action and horror elements. I would always have people in high school who would say, yeah, scariest movie I saw, open a day. But it's primarily a thriller mystery movie, even though it's got crime, action, and horror elements. But that's the best thing about Cohen. He's a milkshake of cool genres mashed together. What would you rate it?
Oh yeah, definitely 4 out of 5. Yeah, maybe even 4.5 if we're doing halvesies.
Please.
I respect the fact that it's not over long. You were saying you could have handled another half an hour or even 60 minutes of it. And yes, that could be great too. But I love movies that get it done in 90 minutes or even
I'm
less.
The same way too. Don't get me wrong.
You know what? I got shit to do. Don't waste my time.
Because we see it even with good movies nowadays. There's 20 minutes of just bordom of the character just walking through the desert, and it's like I don't need to see Wolverine, getting his, his knife claws, ready for battle. I just need him to go to battle.
Right. If I'm watching an X-Men movie, I already know how Wolverine got his claws. Thank you.
Yeah,
I don't need to see it again.
All the superheroes do it. Even all the good sequels do it. There's really the only movie I can think of where there's not much going on, but there is, if that makes sense, is probably something like T2 Judgment Day. Just that kind of movie where basically you're waiting, that it's well framed to where you at least want to follow the people through the desert. And all the other movies just kind of just go into the desert, but we'll just have static shots, and it just drives me insane. I'm like, if you want to drive people insane, do a Dogma 95 style shitfest. Don't do something like that where it's like that's the scene where you fast forward to get to the next fight scene or
Dogma. You just called out Dogma. I like that movie.
Oh no, Dogma 95.
No, okay.
I'm talking about the Lars von Trier type.
No, I'm not aware. I was thinking about the Ben Affleck, Matt Damon thing.
Oh no, I'm not talking Kevin Smith.
Kevin Smith, I love that movie. That movie's hilarious. Sorry,
that is fine. We'll do a Kevin Smith episode and how
I love Kevin Smith. I know he's very divisive in the community. Some people love him, some people hate him. I love him.
Just watch his earlier stuff. That's all you need.
So,
anyway,
so the next one would be what? Cellular would be the
Cellular, next one? Yeah. 2 years later, all of a sudden, people want to buy every cell phone type script Cohen's done at some point, or
yes, write another movie. A cell phone, just a cell phone comes to life and kills people. No, a cell phone,
So that was a hit for Fox. So yes, someone at Warner Brothers decided New Line Cinema. Hey, we already got David R. Ellis already did one of the Final Destinations for us. Why don't we have him do some other?
You think that's how the pitch meeting went? Okay, we need Cohen to write us something about a cell phone,
Absolutely. Who did one of the highest grossing action horror movies for us? Oh, that'd be David R. Ellis in Final Destination 2.
Okay, we'll get the thing. We'll get Larry Cohen to write something about a phone. Yeah. because he's good with phones.
But I don't want to do a phone booth. That's too static. We need something that's going everywhere.
That sounds like a really great Saturday Night Live skit. You know what that pitch meeting was like.
I'm sure that was. They're like, and that's definitely how the later hit that they did, Snakes on a Plane went. What's something that's funny that no one can take serious, but we'll get butts into seat? Oh, okay, yeah, let's do Snakes on a Plane.
Well, if you put Samuel L. Jackson in it, people would pay money to watch him read the phone book, probably.
That's true too. Yeah.
I mean, it's fucking Samuel L. Jackson. You know. Have you heard his recording of doing that "Go to Sleep" children's book? Go to motherfucking sleep, something like that.
I have heard part of that.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's even in many ways. I've seen people. There's one thing on one of the radio stations they do guess the voice, and they use that as part of the key to guess that it was Sam Jackson.
Yeah, that's a good one. So this one, I'm a little less familiar with this one. I have seen it a few times, but it's been a while.
In
fact, I didn't even know Chris Evans was in it. Because back then I didn't know who he was.
I've been getting that a lot lately, and see, this is what I identified Evans with the most after seeing him in other crappy comedies and superhero stuff, and this is what made me a fan.
See, I have to apologize if Chris Evans happens to ever listen to this. What I remember him most was the Fantastic Four movies.
Let's see.
Sorry, Chris.
He was the best thing about those shit fests. Please don't come over here and kick
my ass, but he was the only good thing in that shit fest. Yeah. Actually, I remember watching him thinking, he actually stood out as someone who could have a future, where the rest of the movie just made me want to hurt myself.
Well, that's just it. And see, all those other actors, they've been in way better stuff, but in that, they looked embarrassed to be there.
He actually stood out. That's one of those cases where you see someone in an early role and you think, okay, he's got a future. He's got a lot of charisma or whatever, stage presence.
That's what it often comes down to when you're the comedic relief. And see, this kind of does start off kind of similar like Phone Booth, except he's still kind of just funny. He's not a jerk.
Right. Well, that's the interesting thing about this compared to Phone Booth. You've got a guy on the phone trapped in a phone booth, trapped in a small space. In Cellular, you've got a guy
trying to redeem himself. Yeah.
Well, he's free to go wherever he wants, but he's a little
snarky.
Well, he's still stuck to the phone. He still can't escape the phone, even though he's not stuck in an actual phone booth. The phone still has him trapped because he wants to help her.
Right. He's hanging out with all these. Well, exactly. And he's hanging out with all these lifeguards and other guys who are selling stuff. And so, because they're even wackier or even more spoiled, he has that to play off of. But it's clear that his life is pretty messy. But he just blows it off because he's just like, I'm just gonna go and do this.
Yeah, in fact, you don't like him at the beginning of this, just like you hate Colin Farrell at the beginning of Phone Booth. You don't like Chris Evans' character. He's a spoiled, obviously, slacker or whatever. I'm not sure what the term is, but and then as the movie goes on, he finds his humanity because he starts caring about this stranger.
Right, and that's the other thing too. That's actually a really good tipping point. I saw a lot of people criticize that one. It's like, but this one, it works way better than other fillers. Is like, he wants to get his mind off all his chaotic, crappy life, and get away from all the lifeguards, ice cream vendors, and actually go save this person. Say, let me help you.
Yeah, he actually starts to care.
And then, he starts having to just race against time, battle the cops, and then they start setting him up, misinterpreting him for the bad guys. Jason Statham does a good villain role here. He doesn't have anything to his role, but I like that he's not the main character. And then when the second chapter, when we finally get to William H. Macy's cop character, he's very well characterized here. It's very rare to see him in an action thriller, but it's actually, what I like about it too. It's exciting, but it's not all about the set pieces so much as just it's always consistently exciting, and you do care. And David R. Ellis, he's always been about, you can say what you want about some of his stuff being pretty lowbrow. He's all about casting actors who can actually convey the emotion on the script, even though, don't get me wrong, he knows it's implausible, but he wants to make it still engaging, as opposed to do what all the other people did, which was just kind of cater, over commercialized, just be outrageous. And
yeah, well, I think this movie gets by a lot just on his casting. Like you said, William H. Macy, great. I mean, he's great in almost any. I don't. Have
everything.
you ever seen him in a bad movie? I mean, I'm sure.
I've seen him in a bad movie, but I've never seen him be bad.
Bad, and right. He's always in. But he's not the first person you would think of for this role.
Yeah, that's kind of what was a surprise too. Kim Basinger, you know, she's been in everything, but I mean, this was an unusual role for her too, because she wasn't really a victim. It was just kind of more. She's not playing
she's not playing a glamorous role in this. She's just sort of just a person, just a regular person.
I gotta also say, well, that's just true too. And even though it's PG-13, you know, it's still. I think there's still at least a few F-bombs, but it's not. It's also not the kind of thriller where it just kind of. It feels restricted. It's not catering to teens. It just got the rating because it wasn't violent. It just wanted enough for everybody. And I like that some of the other characters are side relief, but they're the right amount of just kind of comic relief. They're like, you want me to do what? What? Where are you? And that helps elevate the movie, keep it a little light in between the dark moments. And it's also just refreshing to also have a thrill ride that doesn't have misogyny in any, you know. They don't even really lay much of a hand on the hostage. They're just like, shut up. Don't ever let me see any phone. You know,
she actually winds up kicking a fair bit of ass in this, doesn't she?
Yeah, near the end, there's even a slow motion shootout, but it's the right kind of shootout. They weren't trying to rip off The Matrix, and I think it got optioned because also Dean Devlin. I know he's often related to because of his infamous work with Roland Emmerich, but for once, it's cool to see Dean Devlin actually doing kind of just a different kind of popcorn thrill ride. And so while it's a little looser, I still think it's one of the better action mystery movies of 2004 because, again, there's a lot of heart put into it. What would otherwise be popcorn.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of heart. That's what we were talking about with Phone Booth too. I keep going back to Phone Booth because that's the one I'm most familiar with. But yeah, there's heart in this. It's not. I can't think of the word. It's not just shallow. You start to care about these people. You don't care about Chris Evans' character at first. You're like, oh, another privileged, you know.
Right.
But as it goes on, you realize, okay, he actually is. He cares.
Exactly. And
no, I like this movie a lot. Although I haven't seen it in a little while. I'm going to have to put it on my list of shit to watch. But I remember watching it, and I remember liking it a lot. Where's my trivia? I have a list of trivia from this one. I do my homework, you know. I got printed off all my list of stuff here.
And I'm glad you bring up stuff like that too, because I mean, I think there's also a lot to be said for just in general, just seeing how movies like this could have backfired. And you know, 2004 was a great year for action films. It often gets the short end of the stick because we only really talk about some of the lesser sci-fi horror stuff from this year, but there's some good stuff. I mean, we had fucking Dawn of the Dead, we had Hong Kong thrillers like Breaking News. I'm a big fan of Man on Fire, Born Supremacy, Collateral, District B13, and even The Punisher. And so
yeah, you're right. There's some good movies right there you just rattled off. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
I love those Bourne movies. I don't care what anybody says. I like those Bourne movies.
I know. Well, and see, that's the other thing too. Everyone talks about shaky cam. Is like, you can see what's going on here. I don't care what anyone says. I can see what's going on. I can't see what's going on in every other. I mean, if you can see what's going on in a Jason Statham movie, you can see what's going on here. And even a Tony Scott movie. I mean, Man on Fire. There's lots of shakiness and music video.
Oh, editing. I love that movie.
But it works. And you see that in other movies, and there's just no heart put into it, you know?
Yeah, no, I love Tony. When he committed suicide, I was very sad. He made some great movies. I love that the train one he did. What was it? Unstoppable. Yeah. The other Chris Pine, right?
Yeah.
And Denzel, who we just talked about earlier, love that movie.
Yeah. And see, everyone likes to just call it a stupid movie. It's like, no, it's a movie made with heart.
It's not a stupid movie. It's not.
It's a B-actioner.
It's got some great character. What's her name in it? Rosario Dawson plays a character who, like in a lesser filmmaker's hand, would have just been someone you didn't even notice, and she actually becomes a real character in that movie. She actually has some great development. You discount her at first, and just like her coworkers do in the film, and then she's like steps up and it's like, no, fuck you.
Right.
Yeah, anyway, that different movie, but yeah, I like that movie.
Absolutely. And
I like Rosario Dawson. I love her and everything. She's great.
Well, unfortunately, she's going to be still in the show on Mandalorian, so it's. I think a lot of people.
Do I need to watch that? I don't have Disney Plus. Do I need to watch The Mandalorian?
Even if you don't have Disney Plus, you can still, there's Putlocker and all these other online streaming sites. Please, just.
You just said that out loud.
I know, I'm a bastard, but
I'm so old. I remember when LimeWire was a thing.
We talked about that about like 5 episodes ago.
That's how fucking old I am.
My friends used to use Napster, and see, here's the thing. People like to call it piracy. Piracy is only a thing if you make money off of it. We don't make money off it by downloading.
I can't make those judgments. I don't know. But I just remember, I used the shit out of LimeWire back in the day.
Everybody did, even those who don't want to claim that they did. But yeah, it is one of those things where it's like, it is what it is. Everything I have bought, it's because I saw it on TV or I saw it online, whether through Hulu, Netflix, or a third-party site. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to know more about it. I wanted to see the special features. I discovered it through a service that I either do or do not pay for. So piracy only applies if I am in fact making a copy of this movie and downloading it onto a disc using fan art and then profiting off of something someone else has done. That is really only where that could technically count as piracy. But everyone likes to just loosely say, oh, they're losing money. It's like, yeah, well, you bought the movie used, so they didn't make any money off of it. So
yeah, right. That was always video games.
I'm supporting them.
And
you're technically not. They don't want to talk to you.
Right. I remember reading about that. All those arguments in the used video game. With the GameStop buying used games, or the game makers not making any money off of your
at $60 per game.
I know, but the bottom line is we shouldn't steal. But yeah, I've done my share.
Well, this is it. It's like, I'm not going to steal it off the cover, but guess what? I bought it from a used video store, so you didn't make any money off it anyway. But truth be told, most of the creators are just happy to get paid at the end of the day, and they're just happy if you even remember this movie that made no money that people still talk about. So, I mean, I remember I talked to one of my favorite celebrities, and I bought what I thought was a book of his.
Who was the celebrity?
Robert Lasardo. He had a bunch. He's the tattooed Latino guy you see in every other crime thriller. If you looked him up now, you'd be like, oh, he's who they get if they don't get Danny Trejo or
he's the lesser Danny Trejo.
Well, he's definitely a better actor than Trejo, but I'd
have to look him up. I don't know what was his name?
Robert Lasardo. You've seen him in Death Race remake and a bunch of other stuff.
I haven't seen the Death Race remake. I like myself too much for that.
It's all good. But long story short, he had a poetry book, and I bought it off Amazon. He's like, "Where'd you get that?" I only sold it at my conventions. I'm like, "Oh, so someone took the book and sold it on Amazon. Those bastards! I wish I could have bought it from you when I actually saw you at the convention." I didn't, but see, his book had sold out, so I didn't have a choice. I just wanted to read it, and I didn't know that someone else had taken his work and sold it on Amazon. So I take it with a grain of salt. I'm sure at the end of the day, they're more happy that you actually saw their work and it didn't just never sell to anyone or in any way, shape, or form. So now that rant's over, let's go to. Oh, well, that sounded like a fart.
No, that was a snicker, not a fart.
Okay. Okay, I'll take your word for it. I'll take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
So Phone Booth was remade in Hong Kong as Connected, but it feels like more of a remake of Cellular.
Yeah, or sort of a combination. I've never seen Connected, but I read up on it. Or maybe a combination of the two.
It is kind of a combination. It's just Cohen's name is starting to mean something overseas, apparently. Okay, my bad. It is a remake of Cellular. It's directed by the great Benny Chan. You can find it on Netflix. I typically like a movie that has Louis Koo and Nick Cheong.
Yes, I'm woefully uneducated in the Asian film area. I don't follow it.
Well, my problem is they still do much like we talked about trailers earlier. They really do a bad job at advertising, or they just literally just show all the fight scenes, and the rest of it is just boring.
Yeah, that's my what are those the Raid, those series of Raid movies where it's just cops like parkouring all over the building and kicking everyone's ass. That's my impression of that sort of genre. I've never really gotten into it.
Well, and I am also of the unpopular opinion of I don't care for the raid. I like stuff like Hard Boiled, John Woo, Chow Yun-fat, because there's at least a lot of the same stuff that worked in movies like Die Hard and the better sequels and even Heat. There's that cat and mouse mentality, much like what we had going here in Seven and Phone Booth. I want to see how it plays out because I actually am invested in enough of what I see in the first opening minutes. And if I had to give another good example, there's a wonderful Bollywood film that doesn't have singing and dancing. It's just a straightforward terrorism thrill ride called A Wednesday. And you've seen it. It's kind of like Pelham 1, 2, 3, one of the better versions of it, where basically, someone is planting bombs all throughout the city and slums of India. And, you got a policeman trying to outwit him, just say, which of these 3 bombs is legit going to blow up and which of them is just a dud? So there's that sense of doubt that makes it all the more real. And so you want to see how it plays out. And the villain, again, a key to making a good thriller is having a good villain. If you just have a guy who's just evil and the actors just hamming up the scenery.
Well, you mentioned Pelham 1, 2, 3, the original one. Robert Shaw as the main bad guy. Come on, you can't do better than that. Yeah,
same year as a few years before Jaws, and just really showing what a good actor he was. And
such an understated performance. I love that movie. That movie, I remember my father introducing me to it. It's one of the few movies that he and I would watch together that we both
really
loved.
okay.
Cool. My father loved that movie. Yeah, I remember watching it with him. Yeah, he introduced me to it. And I remember Robert Shaw was just incredibly menacing but in a very understated way. He didn't shout. He didn't go crazy with violence. He was just very cool and
I
love them. Anyway,
I mean, Christopher McQuarrie
my dad
and other screenwriters often cite that movie the most because that was what they used for movies like Inside Man. Just have a villain who has a very well thought out heist and not do all this. He's doing it for some other kind of military or political cause. No, he's doing it because
the money.
He wants money, and he figures, hey, I'm stealing from all these Wall Street tycoons who are technically crooks. What's the problem? I'm stealing from other thieves. I might as well steal from a gangster. And then to see all those other twists and see all those other people who have different agendas for wanting to defuse the whole thing, that made it even better. So all the more, I mean, that's kind of what's missing from some of these movies. I'm not saying they got to have too many real life themes, but oftentimes they just rely on the actor and how much ass they can kick. And it's like, figure that out later. Choreograph the action well. But I mean, I can name just as many, for instance, I can name as many good Donnie Yen movies as I can bad Donnie Yen movies. So, and same thing with Jackie Chan. So it is just kind of a matter of, is like,
Jackie Chan sort of exists in his own universe. His films,
right? He was one of the few times where people were like, "Well, he's like Chaplin or Buster."
Right, we're going to forgive him. Right, we're going to forgive the fact that every single one of his movies is exactly the same. We just want to watch him jump around.
Exactly. Or the comedy was just so well done in this particular one. It doesn't matter that
and he never took himself that serious. He was very self-effacing and understood that we really just wanted to watch him like hurt himself. That's what we're here for. We want to.
Yeah. Aside from The Foreigner, he was very rarely serious, and
we like that.
And that's what the Police Story sequels really suffered from. Like, I can watch Super Cop all fucking day, but then I see First Strike, its plot really does get in the way of like 3 good stunts, and the rest of the movie's just a drag. And the other ones were just so gritty and serious, and it's like, but they only have like 1 or 2 fight scenes, and the rest is just a very boring hostage thriller. And it's just
that's not what I'm here for. Yeah,
exactly. And it just didn't need it. Like, I'm just seeing this guy get violent, and I don't know why they're violent. They're just bad. And so, Connected, it's watchable, but other than it being a bunch of crooked Interpol agents, there's really nothing to the story at all. The heroine doesn't have anything to work with. Nothing against Barbie Sue. She's good, but I just... really, the only thing interesting about it is it was done through Warner China HD, the Chinese division of Warner Brothers, but that's it. I if you want a better Hong Kong 2008 crime thriller, look up The Chaser. That one is literally one-stop chase with very few cutaways, and just you understand that the villain just takes pride in just being demented and dehumanizing his prey, and it's not terribly graphic, but it is just it makes up for its familiarity by avoiding the formulaic nature of these kinds of movies. So overall, watch it, but I was kind of disappointed. I just found it watchable, but not a big takeaway.
Yeah, I'm woefully undereducated in the Hong Kong action films, I gotta say.
Well, and that's just it. And the problem is, even when you read reviews of those movies, half the time those don't even match up with it. It's like, what are you talking about? There was lots of action, or there wasn't much action, or the story was fine, or there wasn't a story. What are you talking about?
I think I tried to watch The Raid, and it's like too much action. It's like, God, it's exhausting. I'm getting tired watching these guys. The problem with The Raid is the guys can fight, but they have no charisma. Iko Uwais has been good. Yeah,
right. The Joe Taslim. Yeah. Well, and Joe Taslim, I've seen him in a few other things, including one of the Fast and Furious movies. I'm not a fast guy, but I understand many people are. But you can't say that any of the acting in those movies are good. And so he just suffered really as a result. He just had a really crappy fight scene with a bunch of other crappy actors. So it's just like, yeah, this is wrong sauce.
I'm not a big fan of those Fast and Furious movies. I'm not a gearhead.
Well, what gets me too is people who have a problem with crappy plots forgive those movies. I'm like, you're serious?
Because they got cars dropping out of, tanks dropping out of airplanes and cars, right?
You're the kind of people
you want to see Coolio, drive a plane out of the back.
I
of a
wish
C-130
it was Coolio. He'd be way better than Ludacris.
Was Coolio not? Wasn't Coolio? Isn't Coolio in one of the?
No, it's Ludacris.
Ludacris. I'm sorry. Sorry, I got my shitty 90s rappers confused. Sorry.
And then saying lines like, "Hey, this is Ludacris." I'm like, "Oh my god, fuck you." No.
Yeah, it's like, ouch. Come on.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They Must Be Destroyed on Sight,
the new podcast cure-all, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They Must Be Destroyed on Sight
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We might talk about video games, music. Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Yes.
I am the master storyteller of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers, the Google Play, Apple Podcasts,
what else?
Podbean,
what else?
Podcast Addict,
goddamn,
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, mother. hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair to say
Ah. Yeah.
all that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen, and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, Prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be
could
a rough
you watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-liner plot holes and gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zemenov. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zemenov, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zemenov, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zemenov.
Hi everybody, it's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything. Pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VDClinicPod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VDClinicPod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
We now continue with our program.
And these same people hate stuff by, Michael Bay or even Expendables type stuff, but they give these a pass. I'm like, no, these don't get delivered on anything. I'm sorry.
I think people who are gearheads just love that stuff. They eat it up.
They're going back to Bullet, and they're like, it's mostly real. I'm like, against a green screen.
Yeah, don't you dare sully Steve McQueen. Don't you dare.
Well, exactly. If you want a good movie with cars and Jason Statham, watch Safe or The Transporter or Killer Elite. The very first Transporter, especially.
The Transporter, the very first Transporter, yeah.
No, fuck the sequels. That's as far as what I'm concerned. But see, even I'd rather watch a shitty Transporter sequel than a shitty Fast and Furious movie. So I can't win. And that's kind of how I am with The Raid. I'm not dare comparing it, but what I am going with this is Dave and I just kind of just felt like the characters just sucked, and the plot was not only just too simple, but so simplistic that it just didn't differentiate itself from any other direct-to-video Die Hard ripoff. So go ahead and hate us. That's our opinion, and I can name just as many people who hate that as the ones who like it. So fuck you guys.
It's not a competition. It's not a competition.
It really isn't. It's like, don't force people to like a movie. That's just not how this goes. It's okay to be wrong. No, it's okay to have it be misled into thinking that everybody thinks the same way. So anyway, I'm going to go with this final movie here, which is none other than Messages Deleted. And
yeah, you're going to have to talk about this one, because I know the least about this one.
So you were telling me earlier you saw the trailer. And
I watched the trailer, and it gave me it made me think of Stephen King's The Dark Half.
You know, that's actually a fair comparison because it is kind of a split persona kind of movie.
Although Stephen King's was more supernatural. This is more serial killer, crazy person, right?
Well, it's that, and it's a college professor being framed for a crime. Once again, that's what unites all these movies. It's not just that it involves phones and
someone being right, which is very Hitchcockian, going back to his relationship with
the wrong person.
The wrong person framed for something, right? Yeah.
Lillard was pretty good here because he was playing it straight faced. He wasn't doing all
I almost didn't even recognize him in the trailer. I don't think I would have known that was him if I didn't know in advance that was him.
Yeah, he kind of does his light nature like he does in those Scooby-Doo voiceovers and movies, but he also just kind of, again, you can understand that he's a radical professor who's like, oh, whoop-de-doo, you guys are so outspoken. I'll see you on your paper. But you actually buy him into that. It helps that the people playing the cops keep showing up and keep harassing him because they think they got some dirt on him, but they got nothing better to do. So that's what raises the stakes in this. I'll say it this way. It was supposed to be released, then it went direct to video in like Indonesia and Mexico, and then here. It definitely feels like it could have been either for TV, Netflix, or a limited theatrical run. It wasn't objectionable in how it was made. It's definitely not one that has bad CGI or anything. I think the main issue is there's just so much slow pacing in between the otherwise life. I can't really remember any of the kills. I will say this. There's like 5 different plot twists, but at the same time, it's just a little much just getting there. So I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5, maybe a 3, just because the acting is really good and the camera work, does a lot of the rotating around, documenting what's happening. That became a thing around this time, for better or worse. I really got to say, it just needed a little more inspiration and just needed a little more just life to it, because in between the insanity, there's just a lot of just kind of dull pacing in between. Don't get me wrong, the people playing the students are fine. I think there just should have been a little more just hinting at is one of the students setting him up. Just a little.
I just can't picture Matthew Lillard playing like a college professor. I just can't picture that.
Well, I found it pretty believable because I've just had a lot of professors who are characters in their own right.
Oh yeah.
Whether they were in their
I wasn't in college very long, so I don't have that experience.
There's different times too. I mean, I've had people who were literally in their 30s. They had just graduated and they were teaching their first year. I would meet those kind. Some of them would be almost as big as me, and I was like, "This is wild." And some of them would be very standoffish too, like, "Don't ask for my number." It's like, no one was even going there. Why'd you bring it up? It's
kinda
like
weird.
Someone said something inappropriate to him in the hallway. But yeah, I mean, professors get away with a lot, and I don't mean to dehumanize them because I get that it's a shitty job, but someone's got to do it. And if you love the craft, you do it a lot. And I think Lillard did a good job here at just not necessarily playing it safe, but trying to just kind of be, all right, class, what are you thinking? Okay. And it helps that there's other smartasses in the college class, but they don't overdo it like they do every fucking high school or college movie where, okay, that would actually get you booted from the course if you said something like that. You know, they don't do something like that. You know, half the time the students just have a shit-eating grin and they're like, oh, someone's in trouble, you know. But they don't overdo it where every black person has to talk all gangsta, every white person has to be, you know, slick rich kid. You know, they don't do shit like that. I think the movie just needed a little just more Speedy Gonzalez in the editing department. Maybe even just have more creepy, just the killer just on the computer, you know, typing all the offensive stuff. But yeah, it does seem to have kind of a bipolarness to it. I would watch it again after struggling to make it through the last few times. I would even buy it if it was in one of those Mill Creek, you know, $10, you know, 10 packs, action horror movies. But
yeah,
or even mystery in this case. But that's about it. It's just kind of a almost there but not quite kind of movie. And because I'll just give it this, at least they weren't having Lillard do what he did, you know, with Scream and all the other stuff where he just has to be over the top. He has.
Hey, he's like he's on fucking meth or something.
Yeah, he hasn't taken his Ritalin lately. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm thinking, dude, take your Ritalin.
It's refreshing to see him not play a friend of Freddie Prinze Jr. So
yeah, it's refreshing not to see Freddie Prinze Jr. in anything.
I was just about to follow up with that,
which is nice. No, I want to after from our discussion, I want to go back. I need to watch Ambulance and God Told Me To. I need to go watch those two. I've never seen them, and I need to. They sound. I don't know how how I escaped them. They both sound very interesting to me.
Yeah, if anybody of this generation, you know, if you've seen Cohen's earlier work but not of his later works, please check these out, and vice versa. If this was your introduction to Cohen, please check out his earlier stuff, and it'll give you a better appreciation, especially.
Yeah, you got to watch the stuff.
Well, and that's the beauty of it. You could watch any of Cohen's work. He's got a lot of the same themes, even though he's got totally different kinds of movies. Like, you could watch his Fred Williamson, you know, Hell Comes to Harlem movies, and then watch the stuff. Or you watch the stuff and then watch one of these phone trilogy movies. And that was what was interesting to me. A lot of people in my film class had seen these movies and his earlier stuff. And so that was just kind of a rarity. You know, he's kind of one of the few, along with John Carpenter and even Romero, who every generation has seen because either your parents introduced you to it or you got the Blu-ray, you got it, you saw it was listed on the best movies of all time, because people, again, just cult movies do eventually secede just being just cult movies and do get listed on legit best of all time lists at some point. So it doesn't matter if they're like Blade Runner, like we talked about before, that get just critically ignored. And, you know, just replaying on all the movie channels does make a difference. So, I think that's just always the beauty of these. I always see Cellular get played at 2 a.m. on PBS still to this day. On occasion, and Phone Booth, you know, I haven't seen it played lately, but I'm sure if you looked around, it's probably playing on Stars.
Oh, I've got it. I think I've got it on my Vudu. I need to watch. I love that movie. It's a great movie to go back to when you're like, what do I want to watch tonight? Like we were saying, because it's tight, it's not too long.
It's grim, but it's the fascinating kind of grim, much like Seven.
And you get to watch a real dickhead suffer and then sort of transform
himself, or at
somewhat.
Least,
yeah,
not 100%. No one is ever 100% clipped after being a douchebag.
You almost you almost feel bad at some point. Okay, he's suffered enough now. You know,
right?
I think Phone Booth, out of all the films we discussed, I think Phone Booth is the strongest one.
Definitely, more or less. I mean, because. And then followed by Cellular, and then Messages Deleted is kind of meh.
Yeah, that's my impression. Cellular, like I said, I've seen it, but it's been a little bit of
just wasn't well marketed, and it was filmed well half the time, but for whatever reason, it's like whoever was doing the editing just wasn't editing in the twists fast enough, and it wasn't even meant to be a slow burn. It just felt like everything was filmed too safe or too restrictedly to where there just wasn't enough life to inject in the robot. And I don't know that it needed necessarily a rewrite. Half the time I feel, here's the thing where I find with scripting. Half the time a lot of good stuff happens in post, and I don't mean in the editing room. I mean someone says, hey, how about we say the line this way? It makes it a little more of a bigger impression because you got enough creativity. And I think that's just what happened the first two times. These movies aren't meant in any way to be... By all means, guys, we're not saying these are sequels to each other. We're just saying they're related in theme, because that typically became a thing around the 80s. Or you could even say that about Romero movies. He keeps it very loose in whether they're in the same universe or not.
Yeah, good. And I don't need to even know if they're in the same universe. Why would I even care? They entertain me.
Well, it's just that people have seen them enough times. They just love marathoning them together. So it's just part of being a movie geek.
Maybe I'm just too dumb and lazy. I'm like, whatever, man. Just entertain me, and I'll forgive you everything else.
Well, no, don't get me wrong. Entertainment is priority number one. It's like, regardless of the acclaim, there better be some life in this fucking movie. Don't tell me this is so-and-so's best role of all time, and they're only in the movie for like 5 seconds, you know? And they're the first person billed.
Yeah, just
don't do that shit to me, please. And so these movies, I think, just really, save for the third one, they really did. They were definitely an example of someone doing their homework and making sure that, you know, the work was done ahead of time, and it paid off. Other than that, I really have no other closing stuff to this.
No, I love him. Yeah, if you're only familiar with his newer stuff, go look at his older stuff. Cohen,
yeah.
talking about, Larry Cohen.
And
now I've got some new stuff to watch now too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, these are also kind of one of the few movies where the phone gimmick worked, you know, other than, you know, some of the other rare TV shows or thrillers where the technology is just as much a star as the gimmick itself and the characters. Most of the time when I see someone using a phone, it's just used very bland. They don't show you what's on the screen. They're doing everything you don't do in screenwriting, which is just not tell you anything, just go straight to the explosions. And you know, obviously not every movie has to be 100%, and they don't know how to teach action in screenwriting because it's still frowned upon. Same thing with horror. They don't know how to introduce to you a creepy plot twist. So all I can say is just check these out, and don't be like, how did this get made? Where they were, I mean, I love them, that podcast to death, and I love the comedians, but even though some of them were suggesting Cellular, some of them were just tearing apart saying, this is not a good movie. I was like, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree. Yes, there's some unrealistic stuff that couldn't be done with phones back then, but that's the beauty of a movie, you know?
It's a movie.
Well, it's a movie, but I don't care what they do with the technology. I mean, if you technically can't do that on the Facebook browser, because technically there's always going to be a software update. And even if you don't buy into that theory, I mean...
It's called suspension of disbelief.
Well, that's just it too. You can't say that you didn't care about this person. And Cellular worked even better because, again, he was able to shrug off the snarkiness, the douchiness, and actually say, you know, I actually want to do something right now. Who is this person? Can I help them? Because, I mean, he's hanging out with the lifeguards, and he's getting all cynical because nothing happens, you know, that warrants his, you know, job title, you know?
Yeah.
He's just like, yeah, I'll take the day off. You get here, you know, get all baked in the sun.
Yeah.
And he chose the right day to slack off and actually help someone. So that's kind of the other fun of it. You get those. Well, and that's just the right kind of way to go about in creating conflict in a movie. In every other thriller nowadays, it just seems like they create conflict just to add more names to the cast, but not actually move the plot forward. And it's like, a plot doesn't have to be 100%, but you do need to just kind of... Cellular, I would see, get compared often not only to one of the, you know, Die Hard with a Vengeance, but also Speed. And I think that's a good parallel where the plot just keeps going. It keeps going. It doesn't... It's like Run Lola Run, except you don't have multiple times where the scenario plays out. You get just basically is like the person... the movie is just as fast as the person running against the clock.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example of what did this wrong that was around the same time. Look at that shit fest that was in production hell and didn't even come to the States until a year later, known as 88 Minutes. Al Pacino.
88. Oh, yeah, I think I saw that once. Yeah, that wasn't very good.
No, that was, well, and see, other people were joking, how is it 88 minutes when the movie's only like 70 minutes? You know? So it's like, yeah, it was like big ass problem. It's like, it's not, you get taken out of the movie because when you set yourself up to a clock and it's not playing 100% with the time loop, it's like, okay, well, so why even bring up the clock if it doesn't actually matter, if it doesn't even impact the story? So it's like, if you're going to set up a time-conscious effort, don't dig a hole that deep to where you just can't get out of it and you've just lost any suspension of disbelief,
Yeah.
And so I think these first two movies really did a good job of allowing Cohen his freedom, not making too many changes to his script, and allowing the filmmakers themselves to actually, show what they were good at, because there was enough stuff for them to play around with and add their voice to it. So it's just a very rare instance. I think the only other instance I could think of is probably Training Day, which only got rewritten once, and it was by the same scriptwriter, It launched a career of a bunch of other actors and filmmakers, but...
Yeah, great film.
Yeah, and it's another movie that you don't really think about it. It is a time-conscious effort. It all takes place in the course of one day.
Mm-hmm.
And you forgive it because you're all drawn into, much like Heat and Collateral, you like a lot of the characters that are created. You love to hate a lot of the other characters. It works almost in a Tarantino kind of way, where it's like maybe Reservoir Dogs, where you're just seeing all these, characters against the grain, and you can forgive some of the other unbelievable stuff because there's enough other strong stuff that glues you to the screen. And I see so many other people, we're the nitpick generation, where people love to bitch but not say what they would do better. It's like, okay, well, a movie is only good if you take something away with it, or you can assess, hey, I like this, I don't like that. If it's just a clusterfuck of I don't know what is or isn't working about this slice of entertainment, then I might as well call it a non-movie. So I gotta hand it to this movie for actually bothering to just justify everything that was going on, and just bothered to more or less just I just can't say enough good things about just wanting to actually stand out, and it didn't need to. It didn't have to play popularity contests. It didn't have to get all these other sexy actors,
Yeah, no, a very good, tight movie. I love it, love it, love it.
For sure. So David, where can we find you on the web? I know.
No,
plug.
Yeah, no, I don't really plug. I don't really have anything.
Okay.
I don't. I don't. Yeah, I post pictures on Facebook sometimes, but that's about it. What about you? You plug something?
Well, basically, I am just doing a podcast per day off. I'm literally, I got all this stuff planned up. I'm catching up on movies. A lot of people spend so much time just rewatching stuff for the bit of time. I'm not that kind of guy. I'll watch stuff once in a blue moon that is just that good. But for the most part, really I only do that if I want to introduce them to something new. Right now, I'm just blogging for a few other blog spots. You can find on my Facebook, like Fill in Film. Going to be joining their podcast soon. I haven't heard back, but it's been a busy rest of the year, guys. So a lot of this stuff takes months in advance just to complete because, we want to make the best episode possible, promote it, tag everyone, make sure everyone actually, a lot of people had a chance to listen to it. So that's where we sit down at.
Yeah, well, good. Well, definitely. It's been a pleasure. I love these movies. I've got a couple new ones to watch now.
Yeah,
and I certainly will.
For sure. And thank you always for being on here because, that's the other thing too. There's no point in doing a podcast. I had to do so much venting and assessing. I felt like I was doing a job interview with someone, but I was the interviewee. I was or I was the interviewer, where I was just having to say, just, okay, so, yeah, why do you want to be on this podcast? And, I had other pals, they have a voice, but they don't know how to express it. They just are like, hey, yeah, cool, man. It's like, no, I need you to actually bring a lot to this. So thank you once again for not just being, yeah, man,
no, I
yeah,
try
cool.
to do my homework.
Well, and we don't want to come off as just a bunch of just half-educated talking heads. We do want to actually. I'm
not even half-educated. Shit, I'd love to be I'd love to be half-educated. Kidding me?
Right. And well, and good on you for also just saying straight up is like, let's do this kind of movie because this is what we get from it, yada yada, and. That's why we always do it this way, guys. Is just we want to actually give a recommendation and, give options. Hey, if you like this kind of movie, we think you might dig this one, even if you don't typically like stuff by this filmmaker or this actor, yada yada. You should check it out because of this.
Yeah.
And the same thing with these. Most people have seen these movies, but they either haven't seen it in a long time or they forget about it. And I think that's why I do a lot of the cult stuff, because that's kind of just the thing now. We're looking at a lot of stuff that, I've never heard of this. We're looking at all these independent companies that are releasing Blu-rays and remastering it for people who want to know about this obscurity that they saw on the video store on HBO once back in the day when the market was different. So
yeah,
that's exactly it. So again, thanks millions for being on here.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. And I'll see you next time.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be doing record and quarantine.
Yes.
And see how those hold up with the market.
Love them. Great. Can't wait.
Woo. Okay.
All right then. So we'll see you then. And good night and thanks a lot.
Yes, and stay safe, guys. And for those who listen, thank you ever so much. We don't do a Patreon because this is not done for money, and I'm not saying anyone else is a greedy whore for doing so. But we want to actually just kind of just put on a show and just get some feedback. See, we'd even like to hear your input. Hey, you should critique this more. You should do this more. Yeah, it means a lot. So thank you all.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.